Hello everyone, this is Iran Talk, and in this video I'll be discussing the rise of Cambyses, and he was actually the son and successor of Cyrus the Great, and his rise to power. Well, it wasn't really a rise; he just succeeded his father after his death, but nonetheless. Cambyses' ascension to the Persian throne allowed for the continual expansion of the Achaemenid domains, and his primary achievement was the conquest of Egypt. Now, aside from Egypt, Cambyses did not make any major conquests. Cyrus had actually originally planned an invasion of Egypt, but unfortunately he died fighting the Scythians. And when he was succeeded by his son left off exactly where he finished. So he succeeded Cyrus, and his aims were to continue his father's plan, specifically to conquer Egypt, and that is exactly what he did. Now, prior to the Persian invasion, Egypt had been for a long time been a great civilization, but it had been on the decline for a very long time. You had the Kushites moving in and temporarily occupying Egypt for a short bit, just before the Persian conquest. You had internal instability. You had the invasion of the Sea Peoples. And essentially, what this did to Egypt was significantly weaken it internally. The Egyptian social order was completely weakened due to these invasions. Egyptian civilization had been on a decline now for a very long time, and Egypt itself looked as if it was just going to, it was just going to fall apart internally. And the Persians took advantage of this, and essentially the Cyrus's aims were to conquer this weakening Egypt, but unfortunately he died, and his son Cambyses successfully conquered the region after his death. Now, as for Cambyses' rise to power, when Cyrus conquered Babylon, Cambyses was actually employed in various religious ceremonies. Cyrus actually mentions Cambyses' name in his cylinder, which is fairly interesting. And essentially, during this period, Cambyses, you could say, served as sort of a co-ruler with his father, though obviously his father held supreme power rather. And Cyrus actually nominated Cambyses as his successor, obviously. So once Cyrus was killed, and immediately Cambyses became the sole king. The reason why his father had nominated him beside him to rule as sort of a co-king was to ensure a steadfast transition to power for his son, because if he did not do this, other Persian nobles may have attempted to usurp the throne. Now, this is exactly what happened after Cambyses passed away. He didn't really have any heirs or successors, and for this reason Darius managed to take advantage of the situation, and you could say usurp. I mean, he was also a member of the Achaemenid dynasty, but nonetheless you could say that Darius managed to take advantage of the situation and usurp the throne for himself. But nonetheless, Cambyses' rise to power was pretty, the transition was pretty stable. There were no rebellions, and he immediately took off from where his father left off. Following his ascension to the throne, essentially what you had here was a situation in which Cambyses inherited a vast empire, and he immediately moved against the Egyptians. Now, Egypt was under the rule of Psamtik III, and he would be the last native pharaoh of Egypt. And essentially, Cambyses marched his army through the Sinai Peninsula. He confronted the Egyptians at the Battle of Pelusium, which is in contemporary Egypt, just prior to entering the Nile Delta. And this battle resulted in a decisive Persian Achaemenid victory. The Egyptian army was heavily devastated and completely destroyed. and Psamtik III himself was captured by Cambyses. Cambyses actually had a seal of this, and it's pretty interesting that there's a Persian seal showing this conquest, and that's quite remarkable. And essentially, this conquest ultimately allowed for the Persians to gain a foothold in an ancient civilization, but not only that, also established themselves in North Africa, and from here they would attempt further invasions. In fact, Cambyses led invasions against the Kushites, but unfortunately they were a failure because of the nature of the desert and the fact that much of his army had been destroyed in just the difficulty in crossing the desert, and that alone prevented him from conquering the Kushites. And there were also further attempts to attack Carthage, but unfortunately the Phoenicians, who manned much of the Persian navy, because obviously they occupied the Levantine coast, and much of the Persian navy was actually built by Phoenician mariners. So essentially they refused, and because of their refusal, the Persians failed to essentially expand any further westward into the remainder of North Africa. But nonetheless, Cambyses' conquest of Egypt was a major victory for the Persians, and showed at the time that the Persian army was most certainly the most dominant power of the region, if not the most dominant power in the world at that time, which they obviously were. There was no other real rival to them in the world at the time. The Greeks, you could say, were their rivals, and this is true to a degree. But at the time, they did not pursue any invasions of Greece. That only came later with the ascension of Darius to the throne. But nonetheless, in the Near East, they were the greatest power, and even in the world, they were the greatest power. And essentially, this victory confirmed that for the most part. Now, there's another interesting tidbit here. It said that Cambyses actually attempted to threaten the oracle of Amun at the Siva oasis, and around 50,000 men attempted to head there and take control of the oracle. But nonetheless, this army was completely devastated and destroyed in the desert, and there's not really much. It's not true if there's a lot of truth to this. Much evidence has not been discovered. Some evidence has, but nonetheless, this was a major, you could say, failure for the Persians. But it was not really a huge setback, as obviously the Persians still controlled all of Egypt, which at the time was quite remarkable for a single empire to span from Anatolia, to the Middle East, the Levant, Mesopotamia, Persia, and also all the way to Iranian Central Asia, what at the time was Iranian Central Asia, rather. So essentially, Cambyses just built upon the successes of his father, and ensured that the Persian war machine would continue to dominate the region. And at this point in time, the Persians were essentially unstoppable. Now, Cambyses died under interesting circumstances. It's not clear how he passed away. One theory is that he may have been he may have been ordered to be assassinated rather by Darius, so he could usurp the throne. However, this is not clear. This is only a suspicion of some modern historians. Another theory is that he was returning to Persia once a usurper who claimed to be his brother, supposedly Bardia, also known as Gomata. There's a lot of interesting situations here where we're not clear who this individual was. Either he was Bardia or Gomata, but nonetheless, supposedly Cambyses attempted to march against him, but died shortly after. And this is all according to Darius the Great, who would later become Darius. He actually wrote much of this history for Cambyses, so we do not know. But nonetheless, since Darius was Cambyses' spear bearer, it is likely that he may have killed him in an attempt to usurp the throne for himself. But again, this is not clear. Some historians even say that Bardia was in fact his brother, and he was the rightful heir to his empire. But nonetheless, because the situation is very unclear, we do not know, because much of what we do know comes from Darius, and it's not actually clear whether or not he just usurped the throne for himself, or if he actually or if this individual Bardia was not a son of Cyrus the Great and was just a magus, so a leading religious figure who managed to usurp the throne. It is highly, in my personal opinion, it is highly unlikely that he was a usurper. He was likely just a brother of a brother of Cambyses, and Darius may have actually killed Cambyses and then implicated Bardia as an impostor and usurped the throne for himself. So that's very interesting indeed. But yeah, that's essentially it for this episode. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm really sorry that the quality of my videos has been very down. I try to improve the quality and do what I can, but essentially this is the best I can do for now. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And take care. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.